Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Data and Strategy podcast. Today, I have Christoph Papenfuss with me. I've come to know him through both the data and AI community, but also through the IMAs, the management accountants community, because he was also a CMA. Christoph is area vice president for Planful for the DACH countries. Planful is an FP&A platform, and I'm looking forward to having this discussion with Christoph on all the topics that are interesting for the CFOs, but also for the data people as far as the evolution of modern finance is concerned. Christoph, welcome.
Hi, Ivo. Good to see you again. I'm very happy to be here today. Looking forward to our chat. It's always interesting to engage with you because you have the finance and you also have the data angle.
So let's go right into it. What's the state of modern finance right now? While the whole AI growth is going on, while the whole rise of data platforms is going on, modern finance teams are still struggling with the month-end chaos, with over-reliance on Excel, with versioning hell, final version 7 final. They are the teams that actually wrangle data and they feel all the silos firsthand because they're at the very end of the processing chain with ERP, CRM, spreadsheets, and all that. And also, the companies and CEOs, CFOs are still feeling that they're slow, that their forecasting is lagging behind, and there's just too many of stuff going on back and forth into SAP and Oracle. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, very good point. Indeed, finance is an interesting area. On the one hand, I think finance has grown in importance over recent years simply because of the volatility that we see in the markets. It has continued to increase. At the same time, though, I think many finance departments have not kept pace with the change in technology, with the stuff that's available right now. So indeed, many finance departments are still stuck with spreadsheets, whether that's Google Sheets or Excel. A lot of the forecasting and budgeting is being done in spreadsheets. A lot of the reporting, as a matter of fact, is done there. And then on top of that, in many cases, also when it comes, for example, to the consolidation process, a lot of the postings are done manually, even today. And I think that's wrong. And then maybe to go a little bit further also, I mean, when we look at the workload that's in finance departments, I mean, typically in most companies now you have to do more with less. So the demand on the finance team continues to go up, while at the same time, the pace of technology doesn't really keep up. So it's an interesting situation. So on the one hand, super important right now, more than ever before, probably. On the other hand, the technology is just not keeping pace.
Before we go into the technology, let's just touch on this really human side of things, because you alluded they have to do more with less. I mean, what's like some of these human elements that you think are absolutely undue that we need to change in the area of FP&A?
Yeah, very good point, Ivo. So let me answer this from two different angles. So number one is I personally think finance is a super interesting area. So I majored in finance during my studies, and as you mentioned, also I'm also a fellow CMA. So I'm truly passionate about this area. It's a fairly complex area where you have to accumulate a lot of knowledge, whether it's accounting standards and then also planning, forecasting techniques and stuff like that. But despite all this knowledge that you need to build up, most finance people spend almost up to 80% of their time just entering and validating data, whether that's copying from one system into another, whether it's copying data from an ERP system into a spreadsheet, validating it, massaging it, and all these different things. So in reality, a lot of the finance folks today, even today in 2025, spend a lot of time just on manual labor. And a lot of this labor, let's face it, is not that much fun. Validating data, I've never really enjoyed this. Fixing formulas, chasing references, building lookups, VLOOKUPs is not necessarily fun. When you don't have pressure, that might be fun. But when you're under pressure and you need to deliver monthly results, this stuff gets really tedious. So in summary, on the one hand, you have finance, which is a very sophisticated area. But on the other hand, most finance people spend almost 80% of their working hours on mundane stuff that is not necessarily value add, and I would argue probably not that much fun. And so as a result of that, what I've seen is there's a lot of burnout or a lot of cynicism in many different finance departments. And I think that needs to change. What's your experience with this?
There's a disconnect between what a good FP&A process theoretically should look like and how it is lived, even at very large, very successful, very profitable, very wealthy companies. And it's for various reasons. What does modern corporate performance management entail? What's the definition of very good? How far are we from there? And what are we currently struggling with? I would propose to think about the following. There's a lot of legacy ERPs. There's a lot of modern analytics going on at the same time, very meta modern. And at the same time, analytics is not planning, right? Your Snowflake and your Databricks, with which you're now able to do your zero copy, zero ETL, SAP objects access, your dashboards, your SQL, your machine learning, your scenario modeling that you've done there, doesn't really tie back to the workflows of a modern finance team just yet. So there's no structured write back, there's no management of the forecasting cycles, there's no approvals, versions, ownership, there's no collaboration around it. It's basically just hacking it onto the modern platforms and plugging it into the legacy systems of records and surviving the hell, right? There is definitely a huge gap. I don't think that finance people should need training or become SAP experts to wrangle with these, systems. They are great for what they do, systems of record, all the complexity. But really, as a finance professional, you want to be strategic. You want to do scenario planning. You give insights to management based on how the forecasts are going. You want to be able to do. You want to do variance analysis. You want to do all those things, but without the hell of being a data engineer or having a shadow data engineering team in the back. Question to you is, what's the modern way of doing that?
Yeah, and that's exactly the point, Ivo. What's being left behind with the current state and many finance departments is that people just don't have the time to do the value add stuff and the stuff that is mentally satisfying, just like you described, scenario planning, advising the business, helping business understand value drivers, all these different things. There's just not enough time for that. Instead, they just wrangle with the different tools and shuffle data from point A to point B, which is not right, and that leads to burnout. But to your point, how can we improve this situation? I mean, clearly something needs to change. We clearly have the tools in organizations. For example, we've invested a lot of money into data lakes, into data warehouses. We have sophisticated ERPs running, so the tools are there. They just need to be put into the finance department. But let me actually circle back also a little bit here on this point. When we look at the workforce, a lot of finance departments, especially in Europe, and I take care of the German, Austrian, and Swiss market, what we often hear is finance departments have a really hard time recruiting people. And what I've noticed in recent years is the modern generation of professionals demands a professional environment where they have the right tools that they can work with. So just simply providing them with legacy systems is no longer good enough for them. They literally demand that they get the tools that allow them to be successful. And I think that's where we will see a little bit of a change in the near future.
I think there's a lot of potential. And probably the reason why we feel there's a lot of potential is because we understand how these teams are being bogged down, because we understand the suboptimal level of things. It is a challenge for the next years, I guess. But my message is, and I don't know if you agree, we're very far behind compared to, let's say, where we could be if finance worked with modern software engineering practices like version controlling, collaboration, all of these things where you collaborate on existing data sets with the proper tools and methods and push things forward as a team. It is really not how things have been done for many years in finance.
Yeah, correct. And I think there's an important point here. Companies often shrug this off. As a matter of fact, I recently talked to a CFO who said, hey, why should I invest in technology? We have spreadsheets and they work after all. And spreadsheets are free. No, spreadsheets are not free. There's a cost to not having the right tools. Let me give you an example. I was working in a very large company for a few years, and we had to rely on Lotus Notes for virtually every single business process. It was a royal pain for everybody, and as a result of that, your motivation goes down. The quality of the work that you do goes down because you don't really know how to help yourself. You make mistakes, and as a result of that, why would you want to stay? So there's actually a very high cost associated to that. And then when we also then switch back more towards the finance area, when you operate in a world with manual data pipelines, with lots of spreadsheets that rely on formulas and references, there's a very high risk of mistakes. I mean, as a matter of fact, there are various statistics that show that spreadsheets with more than 100 lines in it have a 90% chance of material issues. So for the CFOs and for the CEOs, there's a very solid and realistic risk that there are material errors in those reports, in those forecasts. So yes, I mean, there's a cost to not really investing in the right technology from my point of view, on the human side, but then also on the risk side.
Absolutely. And also, I mean, right now, if we switch gears and say, okay, they're saying about what's the role of AI in finance, right? Can we just not, just ignore that and just use sprinkle AI all over this and it'll give us great stuff? Well, no. Yes, there's just stuff coming out also in the LLM space for time series analysis, for predictions in general, for doing all sorts of interesting forecasting methods that you can plug into your data. But if you're not equipped with the proper tools, just sitting in Excel and just wrangling to put the correct data month for month, Excel for ad hoc, that will never go. I mean, Excel is the most used analytics tool. It will stay so. But it is a difference between using Excel to do analysis, to making a point, to explain something to someone versus plain plugging data in, relying on Excel as kind of a UI for all of your planning needs. That should not be your business process. You want to run a tight, as near time as plugged into the business, finance, planning, and corporate planning process as possible. And that means going as direct and as accurate to all of your core systems and aligning that with your finance process. And there's no way to do this than investing in some sort of a software solution, to put it
Correct.
simply.
You just hit the nail on the head. So when we talk about AI, how do you want to do AI if you rely on spreadsheets for capturing all your data? I mean, after all, AI only works well if you have enough data to train the algorithms on. And Excel just has a natural limitation with the data that it can hold. And then once again, you have a very high risk of material errors in spreadsheets themselves. And so from my perspective, there is no reliable AI in a spreadsheet world at the moment. Now, this might change.
You could do Copilot. You could use your favorite cloud LLM and pass a token and just consume it. But the point about this is it's not going to tie into your data well, but also into your process well, right? I mean, just forecasting the next 5 months and getting 5 numbers sounds great, but the overall problem still remains. So this is actually the issue that we've seen with existing finance processes, where companies coming to us saying, okay, here's our process, can we digitize it, automate it a little bit better? We'll write the requirements and you guys will implement this and the world is going to be great. I actually advised against that, because if you're going to do such a great job, you might as well spin this off as a startup doing that. And the reason that it wouldn't work is because it wouldn't generalize to what a good process looks like. You'd likely just try to stitch your existing Excel inefficiencies into an efficient but more error prone or single point of failure prone piece of software workflow. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I recommend clients go and see what existing corporate front management, FP&A solutions are out there that could be integrated with existing analytics and with the existing operational landscapes to actually introduce a better process. But then if you think about it, what the current scenario, what I see in companies right now, major companies, big banks, big mid-sized production companies in Europe, is our planning process is basically numbers fortschreiben. So just continue with roundabout estimates on a granular level. Maybe you can have like a special tool that is very limited in what it does to plug in those numbers. But regardless of whether you plug them, the level of forecasting, the level of intelligence used in forecasting is very, very, very basic. So, and if you ever saw something AI-like or a model trained, it's not in the FP&A process. It's somewhere in the operational areas. It's somewhere where operations team are working with it and seeing some numbers and doing some actions. That we see very much, custom Python scripts, custom AI here and there. For finance, they're not really in the driving seat for that. And I think the question is, how to bring finance into the driving seat for using AI to improve these processes. What do you think?
Yeah, so interesting statistic. We recently conducted a survey amongst our European customers, and we found that 53% of European finance teams are actually already using AI, which from my perspective was surprisingly high, because what I frequently see is that companies come to us and they say, hey, we want to do something with AI, regardless of what this might be. My first question is always like, what do you want to do? I mean, what is your objective? What are you trying to achieve here? But let's roll this back a little bit. So finance teams want to do something with AI. They realize that they need to do something with AI. And that raises the question, what can be done realistically today? So based on my experience and based on what we do here at Planful, we see three key areas at the moment where finance can reap immediate benefits from AI without a lot of hassle, without huge implementation efforts and all these different things. So first of all, there's forecasting itself. I think you have already alluded to this. So using AI, you have fantastic capabilities now to leverage your existing data and then build forecasts based on that. This stuff works like a charm today. I've talked to many different customers from Planful that already leverage this capability. It works really well in some areas. For example, if you look at, let's say, travel costs, which typically are very seasonal in many companies, you can very accurately predict those moving forward, also applying certain growth assumptions and things like that. In some areas, it might not work as well. For example, if you have very specific revenue models and things like that. But forecasting itself, leveraging your historical data works really, really well today, and that can add a lot of value, not only in terms of time savings, but also in terms of checking the data for its validity. The second area where AI can help and add a lot of value today is sense checking. I call this the finding the needle in the haystack functionality. Goes through your huge amounts of data and detects anomalies. Those are values, for example, in your actuals or also in your planning and forecasting data, values that are completely unexpected, that fall outside of an expected range. To me, this is hugely valuable because, I mean, just let's face it. I mean, we all make mistakes when we enter data. So we can erase those issues, but in some cases those outliers might be completely valuable, completely realistic. But in that case, finance can sit down with the business and have a good discussion and say, hey, Ivo, I mean, your value is much higher than expected. What are the reasons for this? Perfect, great. I mean, that is valuable. So forecasting, anomaly detection, and then of course also, I mean, everybody works with ChatGPT nowadays, is natural language interaction with your data. So instead of me sitting down, pulling up a report, doing an intricate analysis, I can sit down and say like, hey, I mean, what is my revenue for product XYZ for last quarter? And then I can start interacting in natural language with my data. That to me is hugely valuable for finance. I mean, for finance themselves, because they save time and they can kind of like, I mean, interact with it like with ChatGPT. But also in terms of time savings for them, where the business can start interacting with the data. And the business, let's face it, sometimes are not very well educated on the chart of accounts, on the cost center structure, blah, blah, blah. And so they don't have to go to finance, they can just help themselves. And that to me is hugely valuable. So yeah, three different areas right now that are possible. It's forecasting, it's anomaly detection, and then also natural language interaction.
Let me double tap on the natural language interaction, because I think that's an overarching theme. I mean, very likely you'd want to have something like the AI BI Genie of Databricks or Snowflake Cortex. You want to interact with the data in a natural way. I want to ask you, what's the interaction with the modern platforms that you guys are seeing? Because they're doing this in a generic way. They're saying, oh, if the data is described, if the metadata is there, then the AI is you can use any of the frontier models or a bunch of custom stuff in the platforms and interact with the data in a natural language way. But then this obviously doesn't consider anything closely resembling understanding of finance process, understanding the accounts, understanding IFRS or GAAP or whatever, understanding specifics. So a software solution overlaid on top of that will do much better. But where does the commonalities, where does the competition, and where does the cooperation with these platforms look like for something like an FP&A platform like Planful?
Yeah, that's an excellent question that you're hitting on, Ivo. So I work for a company called Planful, and we offer a CPM platform. And as part of the CPM platform, we have built in AI that is native to our solution. Because you're absolutely right. In order for a finance professional or for a business professional for that matter as well to intelligently interact with the data using AI needs to understand the basic financial concepts like debits and credits, the chart of account, the cost center hierarchy, and all these different things. It needs to understand this. Otherwise, it becomes really difficult to provide informed answers. So our approach is to actually build this natively within our own platform because also, let's face it, there is a security concern. You don't want to have your confidential financials go out into any kind of, let's say, open model. And at the same time, you need to make sure that you have the right metadata, that you have the right understanding of those financial concepts built into your AI so that you can really trust the data that is coming back.
Is it a one size fit all? Where does the data engineering for finance, preparing data sets? I mean, obviously, you also have to feed a platform like a CPM platform also with data and also with analytical data from the data platforms. Otherwise, you'd have to kind of redo everything there. So there is, I think, a reason for both to coexist and actually for all three to coexist, for a system of record, for an analytical platform, and for a proper FP&A CPM solution that builds the finance process in a modern way and ties these two together. So now the question becomes, okay, how do we, you could just interact with your core system through these platforms. But then the question from a finance perspective is what you alluded to. Say, well, can my people work with this? How are my processes built into Databricks and Snowflake? And they'll tell you, oh, we have solutions here and there, but like somebody built something on top of us for their use case. And you're like, I don't want to be building that. I'm a mid-sized company. I would just want to be using it. And then the question is, well, it's just a database. And if you go with Databricks, like the AI database, it was also like, oh, we're the data cloud or data cloud data warehouse still. But still, you have to build everything from scratch. And the question is, what do you think is that they should be building? What do you think that they should be buying in this finance data space?
Yeah, I mean, very good question. I think that leads us to the question: what is corporate performance management software really? What does it do? What is it all about? Let's look at what the finance teams out there have to deal with on a daily basis. So number one is they have a job to analyze variances. They have to analyze actuals. These different things. They need to forecast. They need to budget. They need to provide guidance on certain numbers, but also there are certain elements in terms of the close process. They have to consolidate different companies. They have to do repostings and things like that. And these are all critical financial tasks, which are currently done in spreadsheets, as we said at the beginning. This is where a CPM platform comes into play. I happen to work for a company called Planful. We're a US software provider, and we have one of those CPM platforms. And what you can do here is basically, I mean, as a finance person, you can do all your reporting, all your analysis, you can do all your planning and budgeting. Right in here, you can do all your modeling, but you can also do all your close and consolidation processes within this platform, removing the need for Excel. And that's what makes this really powerful because suddenly you're not interacting in an environment that is highly volatile, that is highly risky and error prone. No, you're working in a controlled software environment that is purpose built for finance, where they have the ability to actually have well structured, clean data and interact with this in a professional and very efficient manner. And that's what a CPM platform does. It really helps you automate all the different processes. It helps you get more insights out of your data. And it does this so in a way that the data integrity is not at risk.
And hopefully you can also output to Excel.
Of course, of course. Basically.
This is the first thing. I mean, honestly, that'll be the first thing someone asks, like, can I export this to Excel? If you absolutely need to, you should be able to do it, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, most modern finance platforms offer Excel plugins and whatever. I mean, we happen to do this extremely well too. By the way, fundamentally, what you need is you need to have a solid system of record where basically your data can reside, and then of course you can use Excel on top of that. But for sure, I think that's always the question that comes up.
It's a good question to ask. Is maybe we could just build something together on that on this round. Is to say, well, if you look at a complex situation like a bank, I mean, you do have to have your golden data record in some sort of analytical platform, because
Yes.
you're not dealing with a core system, you're dealing with 70 to 100 core systems
Yes.
with external calculation engines and the like. And your golden data record resides downstream from a bunch of stuff. Now, your planning process is tied very much into this highly harmonized, controlled data set, where also your definitions lie about what is a customer, what is a business case, what is a transaction, what is a bunch of stuff. And you obviously could tie this down to, so let's say, is there some sort of a connector or a way to connect to this and say, get my golden data record from a system like that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That is the ideal state, that you have let's say a data warehouse or a data lake where you can pull all your data in. I mean, that is the basis for meaningful and trustful finance work. If you don't have this, I mean, of course, then you need to establish the different interfaces to the different source systems that you need to work with. But I mean, ideally, you have a single data platform that you can connect to. Unfortunately, what we see is in many organizations, especially in mid-sized and small businesses, this is not available currently. So companies are very much behind, especially in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And so that's why there's so much manual work loading data from different ERP systems into spreadsheets at the moment. And that's obviously not a good state.
It's not a good state. And also, if you look at the regulated industries where that thing is much more highly, checked, audited, regulated, mandated, and you come to think of, like, when you go in a similarly sized business that is non-regulated, like, we guys have, your processes are shit. Why is it like, well, there was never this push, right? I mean, as soon as if the CPA or the public accountant is fine with it, then they could go in a very suboptimal state. It's nothing material, but just the process is broken. Whereas some of the regulated industries could be taken as a best practice. Now, it doesn't mean that more regulation means more overhead, but it means that you're kind of forced into a more cognizant way of structuring this properly, to be easily auditable, to be easily controlled, to be less risky. And that is just a good practice to follow.
Yep, totally. Yep.
Yeah. What do you think the future of finance holds in this regard? Like, let's zoom out to the perspective of the individual person.
Let's start with the individual. When we look at a typical finance person today, it's no longer acceptable to have just financial skills. You need to have some sort of technical skills, for sure. Whether it's spreadsheet skills, that you know macros, that you know proper formulas and things like that. But ideally, you also have basic understanding of, let's say, SQL or data just in general. So my advice to finance people today, if you want to be successful in the future, is up your technical skills, up your data skills. This will be absolutely critical moving forward, because finance function as it stands today needs to change. Things need to be faster. They need to be more reliable. It will only get faster from here on, as we've seen in many different areas. So finance people really have to upskill. And just relying on your spreadsheet skills alone, from my perspective, won't help. It is absolutely critical that finance people now get skills or obtain skills with different CPM platforms, that they know how these platforms can add value to themselves and also to their organizations, that they understand how AI can help them deliver better work. And so they have to invest in this. From an organizational perspective, I think it's no longer optional to just operate with spreadsheets, because again, you have inherent risks. Data integrity is not guaranteed. You're very inefficient, and also the effectiveness of your finance processes is very doubtful. So they will have to invest, because let's face it, regulation will only continue to go up and not decrease. And as such, organizations need to be prepared to deal with this. On top of that, we're still facing a resource shortage in many different countries. So getting highly skilled people is very, very difficult nowadays. And the only way to counteract this is to have the right environment with the right tools that automate certain processes and that also allow you to recruit the best and the brightest. Because let's face it, the best and the brightest don't want to work in a legacy environment. They want to work in a cutting edge environment.
Right. I would actually add a point to that and say finance should really do more to upskill to own data. What I'm seeing in a lot of companies is data sits somewhere, usually with the CIO, CTO type of situation, probably suboptimal for many companies. I think if you have a properly functioning finance department, they should be the owners of these data initiatives, because then they will tie them very well to their own process, but also to what that actually means for a lot of these cross department initiatives. What does that mean on the P&L effect in terms of investments? Because more and more companies are becoming some sort of an IT shop. Their IT costs are exploding, and the best, really, again with some exceptions, but the best function to own this is finance, not IT. IT might claim that they understand business, that they're very close, but they should be thinking technology, not data. I know that will get a lot of people like, wow, that's not true. Yes, in many cases, but in most, it should be true. And that automatically entails that it's just not just writing formulas and maybe knowing how to do a data frame in Python or some basic use of notebooks, but like understanding data governance, data management, understanding the entire data chain, the lineages, the catalogs, understanding how it ties together to your own business, and what to invest in, what to ramp up, and having a showcase exemplary process in finance that is highly automated and data savvy.
Yeah, totally. You just mentioned something. IT claims that they know business, but in reality, it's finance. I mean, let's look at a real world example. Very often, companies buy businesses, and so you end up with various different ERP systems. All these different ERP systems have different charts of accounts, and then that means you have a lot of data mapping that needs to happen. This needs to be done by finance, because only they understand what's behind a chart of account. What is the meaning behind certain accounts? How do they map to each other? Sure, they can sit down with IT, but IT alone can't do this. This is where finance needs to add their value add, and that's where they need to be data savvy to help with this process, or do it by
Absolutely.
themselves.
M&A is a good example. This is, by the way, where also a lot of the data platform stuff gets plugged in, because like, how do we get this done in 2 months? This thing needs to close. Well, just dump it all there on Databricks or Snowflake, just plug it in together. It actually works. And so I think finance people are doing a bulk of the work, but it is clear to understand that, through this AI, I mean, this is more of a observation aspect, but AI is this hot potato now that everyone wants to own. Everyone wants to be the best in AI. Oh, it's technology. Oh, it's operations. Oh, it's finance. But ultimately, the thing that matters is really who has a grips on their data, who understands entire company data flows, and who cares about improving those. And so there's nothing that finance should do without IT. But claiming that IT understands business would be as arrogant as finance claiming that they're great at managing Kubernetes clusters, right? I mean, yes, maybe there are some enthusiasts out there who do this in their spare time, but this is also not their main concern. So it is important to push the data agenda in finance, to argue in front of boards for investments, to show understanding in how this can improve, the state of the company in general and the state of finance in particular. Let's take a step back. It's not only AI in finance, but finance in AI. So if you turn this around, you're like, what can finance people do in AI initiatives in general? And I find it shocking that a lot of the technology people, conceiving projects, thinking, okay, we're going to propose this and that and this AI development, they're barely scratching the surface of how you should budget, plan, and calculate the cash flows, the ROIs, the impacts of a major investment. Really, we're not talking about how to invest 50K. We're talking about how to invest 2 million, 3 million. Then finance people are out of this because they're not included. If it were an actual product, like a physical product, they would do a lot more cost accounting there. Be like, okay, fixed variable costs, all that stuff that we know. But this is not being done in data and AI projects, and a lot of software projects even. It's just combining these worlds where AI in finance and finance in AI and data is a good idea. The role of finance in AI and data is being improved and heightened, and ultimately data is coming more to finance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but to your point, Ivo, I mean that's exactly why finance needs to change, because they need to find the time to help the business with these major initiatives. And if you don't have the time to do this, or if you're not being pulled into those discussions, there's a mistake, because finance is the expert in helping organizations make sound business decisions. So, and that's a big problem if they're not being pulled into those discussions.
Think about how you should change finance with these new platforms, with AI, and with new approaches. Because if you don't change, you're going to get left behind. Your company is not going to do so well, and you're going to juggle Excel, not get the brightest and best people. Where accounting is already struggling to find people to go into the universities to learn accounting, because they're like, "Why should I be able to do this? This is going to get automated away." To which I say, "Well, how about you just become a great domain analyst in the finance area with a bunch of tech and data knowledge? Then you're good, right? Then you really can do both, and it's not difficult to do both. You just kind of have to focus on it."
I fully agree. I fully agree. I mean, when we look at ChatGPT in our own personal life, I always find I get a lot of value out of ChatGPT if I can also provide the right inputs. Without the right inputs, I'm basically at the mercy of AI. But I mean, same thing for finance. I mean, there's a big need for those foundational skills that you learn at university, that you learn in business schools, that you learn at the IMA, for example. Those are fundamental pieces of knowledge that you need to have. And then if you augment this with AI, you have a powerful combination. But if you don't have the foundational skills, it'll be very difficult. You will be at the mercy of whatever the tools basically say, and it might not be right. Let's face it.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's to recap, like the modern tools liberate finance teams to do more. They should be bold in thinking through like what are the ways to do this. They should be focusing on what helps them plan better, be more strategic. And yeah, I take your overall remark on Excel a couple of times to say, think about how you get out of this Excel purgatory situation to a certain extent, right? To the extent that is healthy. Yeah. Christoph, it was a great discussion. This was like the first podcast that I do with both the IMA and the data, combining cleaning with the great overlap. Those are the two kind of areas, and data and AI and finance, that I deeply care about. It was great to be able to discuss these things and hear your perspective and what you guys are doing and plan for around these topics.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it too, Ivo. And I think, I mean, just to summarize things, I think the time to change is now. If I was to give advice to organizations, which I do on a daily basis, is invest in technology for finance right now. Finance is so important, especially in these volatile times. You need to be able to react. You need to be understood. You need to be able to understand what your options are when things change out in the markets. And that's where finance comes into play. And if finance doesn't have the right tools, you just leave a lot of stuff behind.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ivo.
Thanks, everyone.